Started my first startup in '97. The world told me I was insane.
Our goal is creating future economies that are more regenerative and sustainable.
Something didn't match up. Why hasn't this become the next big thing? And that's where we invested.
The whole purpose of achieving anything in life is measurement.
I'm Cory Linton. I'm the CEO of Edify.ai, and we are focused on building safety products that really focus on people and use intelligence to improve safety. And I'll be moderating the panel, and I will let my distinguished guests introduce themselves now. Marnie, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Marnie Hogan, Senior Director of Health and Safety with Mortensen out of Minneapolis.
Good. Kevin?
Kevin Whitaker, Director of Safety for W.E. O'Neill Construction in California.
All right. Colin?
And I'm Colin Anderton, VP of Operations for EZARC, based down of Salt Lake City, Utah. We're a structural.
All right, thank you. And as we dive into this, why don't you guys each just share a couple of thoughts about what are your 2 to 3 biggest priorities when it comes to safety? And then we'll jump into some specific questions. But we have represented here 2 of the largest GCs in the general contractors in the country. We have a subcontractor here that does work on some of the biggest projects in the country where safety is a big deal. So why don't you each share just a little bit about what keeps you up at night regarding safety, and what are your 2 to 3 biggest priorities in your organizations? And let's, Kevin, why don't we start with you?
Right. So I would say the 2 biggest things that 2 biggest priorities for me would be communicating with my team, efficient communication with my team, and planning of work. If we can, in the office, as the project teams are planning their work, if they can figure out and think ahead of all the hazards, then we will do a pretty good job of eliminating them.
Okay, great. Marnie, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think 2 big priorities are making safety easy, right? Making the safe way to do the work, the easy way to do the work, the easy choice for people in the field, as well as listening to the craft workers and making sure that we hear the problems that they're struggling with, and we're addressing the obstacles that are in their way. Something that keeps me up at night is drift from our policies and procedures. So we have good programs, and we know how to do the work safely in most cases, but everybody has a lot on their plates, and it's easy to start to create new norms out there and start to drift from the established plan or procedure.
And with thousands of people all over the country, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
No, that's really good. Colin?
I'd say for me, a lot of this, you can find echoes of it in what Kevin and Marnie said, but definitely resource allocation, ensuring our people have the tools that they need to be safe, whether that's safety personnel, training, understanding, and then specific tools related to their job. So just the tools and the resources available for them to be safe. And then what echoes more with Marnie and Kevin is definitely just engaged employees, that we're having meaningful interactions with those employees that really help drive understanding of why we're safe, and help them understand the importance of it. It affects them individually and personally. So I'd say those 2 things.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, let's jump into some of our panel questions. And this is the audience. I've got the Q&A session open. If anybody has a question, please feel free to post it. This is designed to be an interactive session and answer your questions. We're going to start off talking about craft engagement. This is something, Marnie, that you have very passionately and eloquently expressed a lot of times. And so would love to hear your thoughts on engaging the craft. Why is that important? And what are some things Mortensen may be doing to drive that?
Sure. Well, I think we've all over the years heard the Gallup polls of, the disengaged workers or workforce that we have in the US. And the latest I heard was in 2020, 65% of the workforce considered themselves to be disengaged from their work. If we think about our craft workforce, our craft workers on our project sites outnumber our salary team members, typically like 20 to 1 or more. So if we can engage that frontline workforce and get them invested in the work they're doing and, proud of what they're working on, which most of them are most of the time, as long as other people are interested in engaging with them on the work they're doing, I think that, the force that they bring is incredible, and the power that they bring to the project sites, and safety, quality, productivity, they're all bound to go up if the craft workforce can be our eyes and ears out there and really, everybody pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really powerful data about engagement and engagement increasing productivity, profitability. It's just benefit. What do you think are some of the unique challenges of engaging craft in this industry versus companies that don't deal with some of the unique challenges of construction?
Sure. Our work can be seasonal in some cases, depending on the type of work we're doing. It's certainly transit, right? People are moving from one project to the next, or they're moving from one organization to the next, depending on whether they're union or not. They may be, committed to your organization, or they're committed to the union and moving on to the next project. So it really can create kind of a transitory workforce, which can be a challenge to work with. And so I think getting them engaged on the project, getting them engaged with the organization, all of those things are really important to make sure that they feel that we're investing in them, and make sure that they are equally invested in us as a company and putting forward their best efforts.
Yeah, that's good. Other comments?
I think from my perspective, that what's difficult for us is we don't have direct labor. So what's encouraging to me is hearing, Mortenson sending a culture of getting engagement out of the field, and it helps that they're working directly for you. Whereas the challenges become for my teams are, craft workers don't work directly for us; they're working for subcontractors. So there's a little bit more effort on our end to engage them to feel part of a team. And feel part of that project team, and make sure that they know that their voice is being heard, and being able to create ways for them to be heard, to make impactful change pretty immediately. That's kind of what we're always focusing on with our projects.
No, that's good. So how do you do that, Kevin? Because I most of my career has been in software, where we're all working in a building together every day. And starting about 3 years ago, I started to learn. I got a deep dive in construction. Right. And it's a completely different environment. You have dozens of companies potentially working together. It's a really unique environment with different challenges. And how do you get all of these different subcontractors marching to the same boat? And Colin, maybe you can actually comment as a subcontractor. When you go on a project, you have the owner, the general contractor, other subcontractors. What have you seen in terms of best practices of general contractors helping bring everybody together and engage the whole workforce?
Yeah, Kevin, did you have a thought there first, and then I can go?
For sure. So what we do, my projects weekly, my superintendents and my project team will host entire job site-wide huddles where they're asking for feedback. They're encouraging the right behavior. So they'll give out safety alerts to the subcontractors. Hey, this crew up on, floor 3, you guys get, sometimes we give out tools, we'll give out gift cards that way to encourage the right behavior. And we pick different topics to go over to say, hey, last week we had a problem with rigging being done properly. So let's talk about that and just try to get everybody on the same page. And then some of my superintendents, they love to do like the in front of everybody, hey, what are we doing wrong and how can we do better? And just kind of giving the field an opportunity to say, we don't like X and we want that to change. And my team will take it into consideration and try to change it.
That's good. I decided I had never lived until I had done bend and stretch with hundreds of construction workers in a tent to Back in Black, and life-changing experience. But
well, I would say with that, I think it's much easier if there's good value alignment between a subcontractor and a general contractor, right?
Yep.
So we're prioritizing the same things, and we understand what the true goals are on the project, right? Obviously, the project has to be driven by a schedule. There's multiple areas of risk on every project, right? And it has to be driven according to a certain schedule. With that, at times, though, there needs to be the opportunity to stop work on a project, right? It's a difficult thing. It's a scary thing for one of the 20 subcontractors on a site to have one of their personnel feel comfortable doing so, right? So when you're on a site, 1,000 other construction companies and trade partners, it's almost a big group. It's almost scary at times for the subcontractors to feel like they really have the voice that's necessary to be successful. And so that's where you see, and this might be a plug for Mortensen, but there's companies like Mortensen and W.E. O'Neill that really do well with that. And then there's companies that really, really struggle to drive that value alignment across every person on the job site. So monumental task, but extremely important in making sure that every employee is safe, because they know it matters. It matters all the way to the top and all the way to the ownership structure.
So pre-COVID, you could have group bend and stretch. It all changed, right? Where you couldn't have these get-togethers that, were really, in my time on construction sites, those are really important moments of building relationships and trust. So how have you dealt with that after COVID? And, we thought we'd be out of this by now, but we're not. And so how do you get the experience of people spending time together to drive everybody to common values, but you can't get together like we could a year and a half ago?
So one of the ways, O'Neill, like we're fortunate we're doing work in California, so it's pretty nice all year long. So we're able to do our stretch and flex or our big safety huddle meetings. We're outdoors. Some of our jobs, we're fortunate enough where we have enough space. Everybody's masked up 6 feet apart, and we just get a bigger speaker so that our voices are heard. We changed over to QR codes on everything that has to do with a sign-in sheet or transfer of information for hot work permits or orientations and that kind of stuff. But it's been difficult. It's been absolutely challenging, and I'm actually very curious to hear what Marnie has to say in the sense of working in the snow, whatnot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've had to rely on a larger number of our team members. So rather than having one superintendent or one project manager be able to communicate the message to the group as a whole, we've really had to count on our engineers to be able to deliver that message in smaller groups, and try to still maintain consistency between what's being shared, amongst the project teams. So.
Another thing we've done too is we had to redo some of our schedules, and where we would normally, kind of load up an area at a critical path on a schedule, we would do a little bit of trade stacking as far as a certain area of the building. Just, we assigned each subcontractor has this part of the building, and you're allowed X amount of people in this amount of square footage. And, we communicated that with the owner and kind of did the best we could to make sure we're maintaining schedule and maintaining productivity, but still keeping safety in the forefront.
Have you guys been able to manage the outbreak of infections on job sites? Has that been a problem?
We've been very fortunate. I mean, we were doing work in downtown LA, which was one of the hot spots, right, for the entire country at the beginning. And we were very fortunate that we did not have outbreaks. We were kind of going to what Colin was saying about aligning values. We had a lot of higher level, like we call them principal meetings with our subcontractors, saying, "Hey, we're taking this seriously. We expect you to. We're the idea is first and foremost to keep people healthy and safe, and then secondarily, we still have to deliver on this product."
We've been fortunate as well. I think some of the challenges have really been off the job site, because construction becomes a lot like family, and especially when you're traveling together, a lot of the craft workers even will rent a house and live together in the same town, work on the same project together and such. So the challenges for us has really been bigger off the job sites, making sure that people are following good practices and, maintaining social distance and stuff if they're trying to get together off the project.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
I think with that, Cory, one of the things that's been difficult is different customers have different policies on COVID, right? And so ensuring that you're training your personnel and keeping them up to speed on the specific project, right? A lot of our people are they move from project to project to project, and they might not have as long a duration on a specific project. So they might work on, multiple projects in a single year. And so it's just different policies. It's a highly politicized topic. And just the need really to just listen to people and the voices that are being heard. But so far, I mean, again, it's almost like knock on wood, we've been fortunate to really be able to manage that well and not have any significant outbreaks. But definitely a new challenge, definitely a new opportunity to overcome in the industry is working through specific situations in different sites with COVID now being a part of that overall process.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, let me just throw out to the audience, please feel free to type in questions. We're monitoring that. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. And let's shift gears to another topic. So I want to talk about getting real-time feedback to the front lines. And this is something, that we've heard a lot about from a lot of companies. How do we get and it was alluded to earlier, how do we get the important safety information down to our frontline craft in as timely a way as possible? So for example, I was working with a project and they had a problem with unbarricaded holes. And they had a lot of efforts to get that word out to everybody. And to just talk about the importance of that. Is that important? Are you doing things to do that? But how do we get data flowing faster to the people who need it most, which goes back to Marnie's comment about engaging the front line and, really helping them do their job better. Kevin, if you want to lead off on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, earlier when I talked about my priorities, like one of the connecting with our teams, communication with our teams, that's constantly how do we get the necessary information out to everybody on that job site. And so that's a huge priority for us at O'Neill. And that's why we're on the lookout always for new technology that can help us bridge that gap. It's the current way, the old way of, used to have walkie-talkies or whatnot, or you can send text messages. Like right now, like a lot of our teams will send text messages out to the foreman, but the question becomes, does that get out to the individual that's putting hammer to nail? Do they know that a crane pick is happening, a critical pick is happening over on the north side of the job or whatever it is? That's what I would say that's kind of like the last little piece of the puzzle to figure out to where we can adequately get everybody educated on what's going on. And then inversely, if they have a problem, they, the person out in the field, again, putting hammer to nail, they may be telling their foreman there's a safety issue out there, but is that getting communicated properly to my team so we can actually address it and get that taken care of appropriately? So that's why when you and I started talking, I was very interested in what you had to say.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've looked closely at a number of projects where they're trying to push information down, and for example, a project may be getting dozens of observations a week. A leader of safety on that project will review those and send out a report every few days, but by the time it gets down to the front line, it's like 7 to 10 days after those first observations. And something like an unbarricaded hole is a pretty serious deal, right? People can, that can be the cause of a very serious injury or death. And so how do we make people aware of those things faster and get there to be more real-time feedback? So yeah, anyway, Colin or Marty, please, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
We talk oftentimes about pipelines and communication, right? What does that infrastructure look like to make sure communication is flowing effectively? Oftentimes what we see what's difficult is, if I'm on one of Kevin's projects as a leadership member, Kevin might send me an email and say, hey, will you please make sure this gets just dispersed to every single team member, right? Or he might send it to one of my project managers. A project manager is kind of a filter point. They kind of have to open that valve again and let that information continue to flow. And so if there's any delay there, that information gets barricaded, or if we start playing the game of telephone and Kevin tells me one thing, but I perceive it a certain way and communicate something a little bit different. And so again, you have an issue within the pipelines of communication that can cause difficulty, right? Which, causes frustration and conflict in a way between the GC and any subcontractor and any trade craft on site. So it's really, and I think technology provides that pipeline, right? It's an ability to have that free flowing information to say, as the general contractor, I need to be able to communicate in real time with every person on this job site, because there's critical information that we can't wait for it to kind of trickle down. We have to do it in real time. So I think it's a major challenge on any, especially large scale project. But I think the solution there is, it's technology based. It's something in the hands of a frontline worker that allows for immediate communication to happen.
Marnie, any thoughts?
I agree. I think two things. One, from the general contractor perspective, it's really critical for us to be able to communicate. And as Kevin said, there's text messages and there's other things, but they're somewhat unreliable. They can be really challenging to manage those lists to make sure that you've got everybody on there that's needed. But there's events, severe weather events, severe incidents where you may, close the site for a day to participate in an investigation. Those types of things are reasons that we need to communicate to people. Don't even show up, right? We're not working tomorrow, so you don't need to come in. So those types of things are important to be able to communicate. The other side of that is, I think, just the respect. Being able to communicate with people directly, and as Colin, had mentioned, making sure that it's interpreted correctly. So we may send something out that we think is urgent, and if the project manager decides, this isn't that important, they could definitely change the tone of the message or add their own kind of personal opinion to the messaging, which could change, what you intend to have distributed. So I think that direct line of communication, both two-way communication with the craft, is really important.
How do you guys deal with? Oh, Kevin, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it also kind of it creates a culture of empowerment to the people in the front line, to empower them to, Colin, you were talking earlier about how as a sub, sometimes, if you see something wildly unsafe, it could be uncomfortable for your people or scary for your people to shut down or say, hey, we're not going to do this because of X, Y, and Z. When you have that direct line of communication, it just helps people feel like, hey, I'm kind of anonymous. You really don't know who I am, but I'm able to take a picture real quick and say, hey, this isn't right, and we need to do something about it, which inevitably, may cause some frustration initially, but inevitably we're appreciative as a general contractor to know people care enough to do something about it.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question from our audience, which I think you guys love to hear your thoughts on this. So am I hearing that general contractors want to be able to reach the crew members directly instead of through the foreman?
I think it's an addition. I don't think it's an instead of. I think it's an addition. There is a lot of information that only the foreman really need to hear, but I also think there's a lot of other topics that it would be advantageous for the crew members to hear.
Agreed. One thing that we're doing is we're putting we call it our bend and stretch kind of safety discussion, our daily safety discussion, into Edify every morning so that the craft workers can pull it up. And it has things like the north stairwell is closed, or like you mentioned, Kevin, there's a crane pick here or a concrete pour going on there, types of information that the craft workers, midday might go, I was going to start working over there. I can't remember where they said, the road's going to be shut down, and they can pull that up then and access it. So it makes their work easier. But agreed, we definitely need to be able to send, clear messages through the foreman to make sure that they're communicated to the crews as needed as well.
Yeah, I think it's a layer of transparency there, but it's not that Kevin's going to show up on a job site and say, tell one of my teams what their priorities are that day. But he doesn't need to be able to send out an announcement, right? Or Mortensen and Martin need to be able to send out an announcement and say, hey, the north stairwell's closed, or there's an unbarricaded hole in this location, please be aware, right? And so it's just that level of, there's a high level of transparency and trust created between a GC and subcontractor. Then there's a level of trust to say, well, yeah, you can send out announcements to everyone in my craft, right? But that's culturally, how does your company operate? And how does it create that level of communication and trust between GCs and subcontractors to ensure those things are happening? So I think at times it's almost one or the other at all times. But every project might do something just slightly different, and that's what's important, is that flexibility.
Yeah, and I think also it's the type of information, right? Like Marty, you mentioned kind of morning safety dashboard with maps and egress and delivery locations, what parts of the building are electricity turned on, what parts turned off. that's static information that our front lines, that I know the frontline craft love having access to, so they don't have to always go ask the foreman. And I think that allows the foreman to spend time on, more important issues of coaching and helping the craft do better work. And so I agree with you, Kevin. It's in addition to, but I think you can also take away the things that are just communicating static information, not static information, but communicating more black and white information, such as a site map. That can get pushed through technology, and the foreman can do more higher level things that you can't just push through technology. So
I would agree with that. I agree, Cory, at times it does actually reduce burden on the foreman. And then again, things aren't misinterpreted, right? If Marty sends out a message to the foreman that says, hey, there's an unbarricaded hole in the northeast stairwell, and the foreman goes out to his craft and says, hey, there's an unbarricaded hole in the northeast stairwell, we've got an issue there, right? That the message wasn't actually communicated appropriately. So I think it reduces some burden on the foreman themselves when those high-level announcements can go directly to the craft workers.
Well, and I've seen projects where this information gets emailed out every morning to foremen, and on a big site, I've been with foremen who are sitting there on their phone trying to find today's email versus yesterday's and the day before, and versus having one place they know they can look for that information. So
right. And there's been times on some of our projects too, like we'll have like a bulletin board that's at the entrance of the project that says this kind of information. But then what happens once you start getting super busy, right? They forget to print it off, they forget to put it on, and next thing you know, you're going out there and you're like, hey guys, this is still the information from 3 weeks ago. Why haven't we updated it? So having the ability for technology is really, through Edify, I can just put an announcement and it hits all the craft workers.
Not to mention, it could be a 20 to 30 minute walk from the bulletin board out to the work site.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. Let's shift gears a little bit. And, I think Colin would love to hear, how do you as a subcontractor deal with the complexity of safety requirements from general contractors, safety requirements from owners, safety requirements from your own company? And I have talked to subcontractors who follow 3 programs. They have their own program, they have the GC's program, and they have the owner's program. And I've talked to multiple subcontractors whose crews actually do 2 pre-task plans a day. They do their own and they do the general contractors. And I would imagine there could even be some who may be doing 3, but it's right. How do you deal with that, Colin? And how can we improve that whole situation so that it's more efficient for everybody?
If you ever want to brainstorm new ideas for a safety theme that year, I have seen every potential idea out there, right? So is our teams, because it is not a problem in any way, but definitely something that has to be overcome, right? Every project we go on, different, whether it's a pre-task planning card, a JHA, from track forms to flare cards to all these different terms that they're called. We have guys that have hard hat stickers for days on the different, themes of that project and the ways we're going to be safe on that project. And so it does, what I've seen for the most part is that it requires a higher burden upon management personnel, learn safety system, right? And at times you ask yourself the question, is the goal? What's the outcome of this safety process, right? Am I just trying to learn, Kevin's safety processes versus Marty's processes, or am I just trying to be safe, right? If the goal is to be safe, does it necessarily matter the vehicle in which we arrive at that outcome, right? That's probably the biggest thing. Oftentimes when you work within a system, general contractors have to work on managing their risk, right? And being compliant on those projects. And so that's the shared outcome. But without a singular technology or a singular way of managing that risk, there's a difficulty that every project you have to retrain your people on a little bit different way of doing things, right? It's on this job site, we film out this way, we send in these personnel, versus a different job site, we do it a little bit differently. Fire watch is an hour here, 2 hours here, and 6 hours on these projects. And so it is always adapting and changing, and there's a burden there to train on that process depending on the specific job site.
Did you say 6-hour fire watch? Is that real?
Yeah, chemical facilities can be up to 6-hour fire watch. Yeah, so usually somebody's staying late.
Jeez, that's a long fire watch.
It's a lot of fire watch. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. No. Good comments, Kevin or Marnie. Any thoughts there before we move on to another topic?
My comment would be I know the pains of going to different owners and having different systems, right? I go to work with a Disney or a Boeing or a, insert whatever owner. They have their own systems that we need to follow. So I can only begin to understand and empathize with Colin when a subcontractor not only has that, but then they have a Mortensen or an O'Neill. Which job are they on? And then they have to go through this. So it's frustrating. I think that figuring out a consistent way to, implement systems would be ideal.
So
and I would say,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Cory.
No, go ahead.
Well, I would just really quickly with that, I would say the only thing that's difficult is if there's not, back to our understanding concept, right? If that general contractor and the owner have that understanding, right? We go on job sites where, the EHS manual is 500 pages thick. We go on other projects where they say, hey, we're relying on your EHS systems to be safe on our project, right? So you have this real, and then everything in between it. There's this real, every project is very unique. And as long as that project team are understanding of that, then you can be successful. It's a burden, but you can be successful together on it. If there's conflict, there is really where problems arise.
So I have a project I visit frequently, and the owner has a requirement of so many observations per week for all the safety pros, and they're considering making that requirement for all foremen. The general contractor has a requirement for observations and a different system. And I know of multiple subcontractors who have their own observation system and a requirement of so many observations given either day or week. And so it's just insane in many ways. So you have 3 sources of observation from the subs, the GC, and the owner, but there's no view of the whole thing, right? They each kind of have their own set of data. And so I think that's one of the outcomes of this very dispersed workforce with different companies. But I think there's a real need to try to bring that data together so we know what's really going on. So, yeah. And just one comment we have from the audience. Colin, you had mentioned an announcement about an unbarricaded hole. I think the comment came that, hey, that would not go out as an announcement. That would go out as, what the hell, barricade it now. So before an announcement ever went out, it would be barricaded, right?
Right.
Just wanted to make sure that was clear. We would never just send out a warning. We would fix it, and then we would say, go check your own area, make sure it doesn't exist there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
So for the record, I had the same thought, but I didn't say anything, and I should have. So I thought, no, they would fix that. Like the people I know.
That would be the first.
Yeah.
That would be the first concern, right? If that's an FYI, there's more problems than just communication there. So yes.
So
different example, but yes.
Good point.
Thank you. Thank you. Good catch.
Yes, very, very good catch. No, it's important. Yeah. I actually thought I bet Marnie's thinking about that one. So
KP said FYI you may die. So yeah, that would not be the communication. Hey, foreman, please forward this to all frontline craft workers.
Right.
Yeah, and a you may die thing is not a announce, it's a fix.
Yep.
And then say look for others. No, great point. Thanks, Marnie. Okay, let's shift to a topic that I've been really kind of excited to talk about. And this is actually something that KP, good timing, KP and I talked a little bit about, and that's the role of owners when it comes to safety. So what I would love each of you to comment on, number one, should the owner have a role in safety? Does it help or hinder your own efforts? I mean, there's a whole bunch of really interesting topics on this, but let's kind of get a conversation going on this. And first of all, just comment as general contractors and subcontractors, how what should the owner's role in safety be?
I'll start off. I think that the owner or the client should be involved. They should have they should care what their general contractors and subcontractors are doing on the site, making sure that they're keeping people safe. There's a transition. I'm seeing a lot more owners do OSIPs, which tells me that they see that there's an insurance upside. Which means that the owner should be having a lot more concern of what the performance is on a safety standpoint, keeping people safe. Right?
I would agree. I think to Colin's point earlier of GC having to align kind of the cultures of all of the trade partners, I think that alignment in safety culture between the client and the general contractor is important as well, making sure that they're, in agreement as to how things should be approached. I think making sure if the client has expectations for safety staffing, I think putting that in the contract is nice. It makes for alignment in terms of bidding, right? Everybody knows and is coming to the project with the same expectation as to how they're going to staff it and manage safety on the projects. And the other thing is, in my experience, if the customer has it in the requirements, we figure out a way to do it as a general contractor. And the example I'll use is working for the Corps of Engineers. So the Corps of Engineers has a whole different set of expectations as a customer than most of our commercial contractors or commercial customers. And we figure out how to meet every one of those expectations. And I'll say that our safety performance is typically quite good on our federal projects. I'm proud to say it's quite good everywhere, but our federal projects, definitely manage to accomplish all the expectations of the Corps of Engineers, execute the work on time. They're still profitable for us. They're still on schedule. So I think that, when the customer outlines that and sets the expectations, again, they know what they're getting, and they know, all the GCs know exactly what they're getting into. So.
I would say with that, it's impossible to predict the future, right? As a general contractor or a subcontractor put together a pricing and a contract strategy and a project strategy, there's no way they know the challenges that they're going to face along the road, right? So if you have an owner really bought in there to the safety, I've seen owners that they want to drive the safety themselves. They have a lot of EHS personnel on staff, and they really want to be the champions and the leaders of that. There's other owners that they ask the general contractor to lead out on that effort. I don't think either way it necessarily matters, as long as the owner is bought into the importance of the overall safety of employees on that job site. But I definitely think if you have an owner that doesn't understand and hasn't been educated as much on health and safety, that it can cause challenges, it can cause problems, right? Because as things arise, maybe a schedule gets delayed a little bit because of a safety incident. There's really not an understanding of, no, when these things happen, we need to dive in and really take care of the issues at hand. And finances or schedules or things like that might have to change a little bit or shift a little bit in order to do that effectively. But there's a full support from every team member on the project, from the craft worker to the ownership team. There has to be full support there.
So I've talked to numerous client owners, anywhere from small ones to multi-billion-dollar ones. And I've heard every answer imaginable with the question, do you get involved in safety? Everything from, yes, we're an OSIP and we're very actively involved, to this is one of the largest real estate developers in the country. And the answer was, yeah, we don't get involved with that at all. The worst one I heard was a developer they're probably in the few $100 million a year, but their exact response was, that's not our problem. That's the subs problem. They actually even said the subs more than the GC, which really surprised me. So there is not a consistent view on owners' involvement in safety out there. And I'm curious, I know you all well enough that you've all worked on very big, sophisticated projects that are OSIP driven, where the owner is very involved. What would you say to an owner that's not that involved in safety about why they should get involved in safety? Like what's in it for them? Why should they care about this as an issue?
I think we see that with some of the clients that we have, some of the developers we have, and we'll, assess a job. Myself and the project executive team will assess like as a job's being bid. We'll kind of approach the owner and say, hey, there's a lot of risk on this project and we want to staff a full-time safety person here. So, as we're going through that bidding or negotiations with the project, we really try to express to them, this is why we think it's important to have this kind of staff, and talk it out with them of like what kind of risk that puts their project at if we don't have these types of people on there, if we don't have the type of coverage or the amount of coverage that's needed. So like that's one of the first steps that I think O'Neill that we do, and I would imagine a lot of GCs go about it that way.
I think making it a better work environment for the craft workers makes it, again, kind of going back to the pride that they have in the work that they're doing. The quality, productivity, and safety go hand in hand. And so if it's a safer place to work, if it's a more productive place to work, a more enjoyable place to work, they're probably putting forth more effort into the quality of work that they're giving. And I think overall you're going to get a better product, probably, as Kevin was saying, with less schedule risk and less safety risk and all of that if you have it staffed appropriately. So
good.
I would add, for those who want to get involved, I think it's really important again to have that alignment with the general contractor, because we do it. So I'll go onto a project site and I'll create a kind of to-do list based on what I see that's not happening on the project site. And, oftentimes our poor engineers will go, yeah, that's my to-do list. Like, I already had it. If you would have asked me, I would have told you it's what I haven't gotten to yet. Right. So making sure that the customer, if they are involved in safety, that they really are aligned, lock in step with the general contractor and the trade partners, and they're supporting that effort. Because as Colin talked about earlier, we work really hard to build a level of trust with the craft workers in the field. And if there's not alignment, if the customer or if someone in the chain of command has more of that safety cop mentality, it can really be detrimental to that trust that we're trying hard to build and that culture that we're trying to build on the projects.
Yeah. KP just posted a question, which I was actually having the same thought. Given the tight labor market, how does a safe and transparent work environment, is that a recruiting tool that can be used? And, love to hear comments on that.
From our side, both from a recruiting tool, also for, it's difficult to find trade subcontractors. Right? So not only is it difficult to find craft workers, but it's difficult to find sophisticated subcontract partners. And we know, our people know good projects. They know good construction teams. They know the type of work they want to be at, right? So if there's not that transparent work environment, team members know that, and it's a little bit of a turnoff for them to say, I don't want to work here, but I can work over on a different project or under a different general construction group with better policies and procedures and a more healthy work environment overall, where I feel safer and more engaged.
I think absolutely. And I think it's a point of respect, again, showing the workers the respect. None of us would accept a job that was unsafe, or we don't know how long it lasted for, or who the final user of the building or the product was, or, any of that. Like, we all want to know that our work is valued and that we're contributing to something bigger and how long it's going to last. And so I think absolutely making sure that we're transparent on all of those points is helpful in recruiting and then really maintaining a long-term workforce.
Yeah, for us, it's again, we don't have direct labor, but for us, it's with our newer engineers or newer superintendents that are coming on board. That's what that is one of the selling points for us of like, hey, we're gonna do things right. We want to do things right and have that intention too. So that it definitely helps.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with frontline craft, just in designing our software, and I'm kind of a unique person because I'm not their boss. I'm not part of the general contractor. I'm not a sub. And sometimes they're a lot more open with me than they might be with, with people from the GC or the owner or the sub. And I will say, where there's a strong culture of safety, like, Marnie, I've spent a lot of time with Mortensen Craft. They know the culture of Mortensen, and I can tell it means a lot to them. I mean, they feel like Mortensen actually really cares about them. And it's pretty cool to see when they really believe that, because, it's not just lip service. So I think it is really powerful. So, and I've talked to some of them who have come from other areas where it is lip service. It's not real. And they know the difference. So very much so. Yeah. So talking about the labor market, let's talk about Gen Z a little bit. There's a ton of information out in the world about Gen Z and Gen Z having different motives, and we could spend hours on that. But let's talk about Gen Z from a hiring standpoint in construction. How do you guys have challenges dealing with the current people coming up in the markets, for labor? Do you notice differences, and what are those differences, and how do you deal with those? And just to spur the conversation, I'm going to share some of my own thoughts as a little bit of an outsider. Gen Z was born with a cell phone in one hand and a tablet in the other hand. We used to say cell phone in one hand and a laptop in the other hand, but they've kind of moved beyond laptops. They are so technically proficient that I've seen them come into this world that is very paper driven and feel like, geez, is this for real? And so it's interesting, right? And that's one thing I've seen where they feel like construction is not as technically sophisticated as the rest of the world. And so I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that or other aspects of getting labor, of labor, and especially with the infrastructure bill, right? The tight labor market is only going to get tighter. It's going to become a much tougher labor market over the next couple of years. So, thoughts, and of course, thoughts and other questions from the audience.
I think in some ways, Cory, what's exciting, I think it's extremely important. What's exciting about a more technology proficient workforce in a lot of ways is the opportunity to provide technology to that workforce, right? The computer now people have in their device, and they're selling their device every day, provides a lot of opportunities. It's difficult to marry what's the best way to say this, but a workforce that doesn't have the technical skills necessary to really navigate technology versus a force that can really quickly and easily pick up on new technology and actually take the technology further than maybe even their management team can, right? That provides a ton of opportunity to do everything we talked about, right? To be more transparent, to open up lines of communication, to come up with better ideas and safer ideas on projects. And so what it does is you bring this opportunity to really think of different ways to accomplish the same tasks, essentially. There is a major, if you look at the statistics on the future labor shortage in craft workers, we're seeing it today, and it seems to be a continuing trend. It's going to take a Gen Z to help us solve that problem, right? And they're going to have to think outside the box. The solution cannot be, we'll find more bodies to put on construction sites. They're not going to be there. So Gen Z and every other generation before and every generation after is going to have to help solve those problems. It seems like that generation is really adept at coming up with a technology solution and driving that technology solution. So that's an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, along those lines, I was talking to a gentleman who I consider very sophisticated in finance, economic issues, and we were talking about inflation. And his inflation is happening, wages are going up. It's happening everywhere. Raw materials are going up in cost. It's going to make its way down to wages, which is really going to affect the construction industry. And so there's going to become more and more pressure to pay more, which means we're going to have to find ways, and there's not enough people to hire anyway. So we're going to have to find ways to drive efficiency with technology, with some of the processes that happen in the business world, that have been happening over the last 30 years. I remember at Microsoft in 1999, they sent out an announcement and said, we are completely paperless except for receipts that you have to send in for reimbursement. That was it. And then I started coming into the construction world a few years ago and went, wow, not there yet. But I think there is a lot of opportunity there. I think there's opportunity for companies to show leadership and to push efficiencies that we have not discovered yet.
I think with Gen Z, like becoming more technically proficient as a company, that becomes there's the mention of like how with the tight labor market and recruiting, that does become a point of contention for recruiting, of getting the better tradespeople, the better engineers, superintendents, because they're looking at this saying, wait, you guys are still filling out X, Y, and Z on paper. We have these little cell phones that can do all of this. Like we can talk to anybody, and they're looking for companies that are being innovative in that market. So yeah, like I think that Gen Z is pushing, going to push the dial on that.
And I would agree with Colin. I mean, I think that they're going to push us to get better, right? They are going to push us to lean even more into the technology. I mean, you think about it, nobody makes me check Google Maps or the weather app or anything else, but I appreciate the information that it gives me, and it makes my life easier, and therefore I go there. So, I mean, the more our craft workers get used to having a resource where they can go and find information, the more they're, it's going to create a pull, and they're going to want that versus us saying you have to go there.
Yeah, and I've personally spent a lot of time, as I mentioned, with frontline, and I've lots of time with Gen Z, with older foremen who are kind of crotchety and you wouldn't think very technically sophisticated. And it never ceases to amaze me. There's always a few people who don't want to be technical. And I have to say, most of the older people on these sites, they adapt really well. I've found, I've come across a flip phone maybe half a dozen times. 3 of the times was somebody who was older than me, and 2 of the times were like these young frontline craft guys who, for whatever reason, did not want a smartphone. So it's really rare, but I thought when I first got into this a couple of years ago, I thought we would constantly be fighting the battle with older workers on site and fighting technology. Haven't seen that to be the case. They understand that if you can show them the clear value, they might be a little slower to pick it up, but once they pick it up, they're all in. So,
well, what I think is exciting there as well, Cory, is you look at virtual reality, you look at the build design space and what you can accomplish. Building things is really cool, right? I mean, I think before most people hopped on the phone, you're more a little bit about the LA or the Las Vegas Raiders Stadium down there in Las Vegas. What an incredible, amazing project, right?
Yeah.
It's going to have an appeal, right? So if you can bring technology and you can show, I mean, imagine if Marnie could go down there and as a recruiting thing, pull up the stadium in a VR and hand people VR headsets and they can walk around and look at that. That's incredible. I mean, it's awesome to be a part of some of these super projects and work on just really, really fun initiatives and things that, for 150 years, people are going to drive by the Las Vegas Raiders Stadium. So there's an opportunity there from a recruiting standpoint, the tight labor market. The technology is quickly coming together to really do some really fascinating things there that can't be done in office, right? If I work in a different field, accounting or software or something similar to it, I don't have an opportunity to build a Raider stadium. It's just not what I would do every day. So the technology allows that to be an even kind of, we use the term cooler space, right? A more intriguing space to be a part of.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that construction was probably a little slow out of the gate compared to a lot of industries, but you're right. I mean, there's the virtual design construction now. Foremen are using iPads to do all kinds of things out in the field. We've got VR, we've got apps like Edify. I mean, we're putting tools in people's hands out in the field, and yet you're not stuck behind your desk in a cube all day long. You actually get to go out and build really cool stuff. So now I kind of think we almost have more of a marketing problem than we do a technology problem.
I think that's true, actually, right? I mean, some of the most sophisticated technology in the world, AR, VR, digital twin, the robot dog on construction sites, there's some really cool stuff out there. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, listen, we are almost out of time. I want to just make sure if anyone in the audience has any comments or questions, they can post them. But I also would love to, first of all, I want to thank our distinguished panelists for taking time out of their busy days to be involved, but just give each of you a chance to share any parting thoughts on, safety as it relates to, this conference is being attended by a lot of general contractors and a lot of client owners. So maybe if there's, any final messages you want to share with that group, want to give you a chance to do so. So let's just start off. Let's go Marnie, Kevin, Colin, for that. Not to put you on the spot first, Marnie, but I just did.
No, I guess one forefront we didn't talk about is, where AI could take us. And I think that's an exciting area in
Yes.
as well. And, the learning that we can have from all of the data that we're already collecting and how it can help us hopefully prevent future injuries. So,
yeah. And on the AI, super important point, and that's a whole topic in and of itself. But one of the challenges of that are all these disparate data systems. I mentioned where the sub has an observation system, the GC has an observation system, and the owner has an observation system. This is one of the challenges of AI in construction because all these systems are separate and they're not connected. But there's an opportunity there to bring that together so that we can leverage some of those, sophisticated AI and machine learning and predictive analytics. So, no, great point. Great point.
Right. You hit it right on the head. What I was going to say, Marnie, just leverage the technology that we have today and help people at every level buy into the culture of zero injuries and sending everybody home safe. And that's going to create a more productive and better product for everybody.
I think echoing that, it is construction companies do a great job of collecting a lot of data. Right now, they collect that data in paper forms for the most part. But as you have events like Shadow Summit where you talk about technology and innovative ideas, and then products like Edify where you leverage that technology to provide a silo, a place of information for all that data to be gathered and analyzed. That's where the future of construction will be, right? Where events like this place, and as groups like Shadow Summit and Edify continue to push forward in their spaces, these problems will begin to be solved, and more innovative solutions will kind of carry us into the future.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And I feel like we did focus more on the people-focused part versus the intelligence-driven, which we did. But, at the end of the day, it is about the people, right? And the intelligence needs to help us not only reduce injuries, but give our craft workers better environments to work in, and because that will improve productivity, quality, and they deserve it, right? They're out there on the front lines working. So we'll just do a plug for, we need a whole session on intelligence and how it can help us help our people to be safer and more productive. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
thanks.
Thanks, guys.